Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another LEAD1 webinar. This is our 40th webinar amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. We thank you for joining us this afternoon. Tom McMillan, LEAD1's president and CEO, is having some technical difficulties, so we apologize for the delay in our start. However, we do want to get this conversation going. We'd like to thank LBYD Engineers for sponsoring today's discussion. We have a great set of panelists here. First up, we have Brad Christopher, who's the president of LBYD Engineers. He brings 25 years of experience in structural design, covering new construction, renovations, and additions to existing structures for institutional, athletic, commercial, municipal, and industry uses. He's registered as a professional engineer in 10 different states. We also have Brad Harrison, who is the senior project manager and branch manager for LBYD Engineers. He too brings over 20 years of engineering experience in structural design, including previous experience working for the facility group for Auburn University. He is a LEED accredited professional with experience in structural engineering design, including various educational, institutional, residential, and retail projects. We also have Gregory Forthifer, who is the Associate Athletics Director of Capital Projects with Auburn University. Gregory also has 20 years of experience in construction-related projects and has successfully completed large athletics projects at Auburn as a project manager and is currently responsible for overseeing and managing Auburn Athletics capital projects and plans to complete the new football performance center in the fall of 2022. We also have Andre Cioldo, the Associate Athletic Director for Facilities and Operations at the University of Cincinnati. Andre is in his 9th year of handling all athletics facilities, day-to-day scheduling and maintenance, along with construction and renovations for the Bearcats. He has previously worked at Kent State University and the University of Northern Iowa. And finally, we have Caitlin Seafred, the marketing manager at LBYD Engineers, and she brings over 7 years of marketing experience in the AEC industry to LBYD and the Northwind group of companies. She's responsible for working alongside business development and key stakeholders to determine strategic direction for the engineering business line and key pursuits. So before we get into today's discussion, I want to quickly go through a couple housekeeping items as we do on every webinar. First and foremost, all attendees other than panelists will remain in a listen-only mode for the entire discussion. However, if you would like to speak, there are a number of ways which you can do so. The first would be to use the raise hand function. This is part of your control panel. Depending on the device you're using, this will appear on the right side of your screen or on the top or bottom toolbar. This will notify me to unmute you individually and ask your question. Second, and by far the most popular way to ask a question, is to use the questions tab, again, part of that control panel. These questions will be read aloud and that attendee will remain anonymous. And finally, you can also write a question in the chat box. However, please note that anything written in the chat box will be seen by the entire audience. I also want to quickly make a mention and say that today's discussion is being recorded and will be circulated alongside a written recap within 24 hours of the conclusion of today's discussion. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Brad Christopher, who can tell us a little bit more about LBYD Engineers.
Thank you, Hannah, for the introductions and the ground rules, and thank everyone online for attending. We'll be respectful of your time. We'll try to stay on time and certainly make it worth your while. We are excited, though, about this webinar and this panel. Glad to have representation from University of Cincinnati and Auburn University. And as Hannah mentioned, both Brad Harrison and I, we're structural engineers, work for LBYD Engineers, and have a lot of experience in sports-related facilities. Just real quickly, a little bit about LBYD Engineers. We're a civil and structural engineering firm. We have multiple offices in the southeast part of the United States. We do work all over the country. Our firm is part of the Northwind family of companies. Our firm has been around for about 50 years. We have a lot of university sports related type experience, stadiums, arenas, additions, renovations, new construction. Hopefully today we'll talk about something that will pique your interest, and if so, it may be something that we can help you all out from a planning or design perspective. Kind of an overview of what we'll be discussing today will be 3 main topics. We definitely want to talk about how to create a digital experience for your fans and recruits. Certainly video boards and ribbon boards are 2 of those ways, but we've got some other ideas we'll discuss. Adaptive reuse of existing facilities is something we'll touch on as well. Could you be using some of your facilities for some other things? It'll be interesting to hear what Gregory and Andre have to say about that. And then finally, restoration and maintenance of existing facilities. Certainly not a glamorous topic, but something that has to be addressed. This is not something that your donors typically donate money for. You're not putting somebody's name on a restoration or maintenance project, but you really need to have a plan in place. You need to have your facilities inspected, especially your exposed structures. You want to be as proactive instead of reactive as you can. So the game plan for the rest of the webinar will be, we'll have a panel discussion about 25 minutes long. Caitlin Seafried, our marketing manager for LBYD, she'll MC that. She'll ask this panel some questions regarding the items that I've already mentioned. And then next, we'll take about 10 minutes and we'll show some project photos and we'll discuss each of those. And then finally, we'll try to save about 15 minutes at the end for some Q&A. And as Hannah said, there's several ways you can enter questions. Probably the chat box or the questions box is probably the easiest, and we'll try to get to those. So Caitlin, I'll turn it back over to you and let you get us kicked off.
All right, thanks, Brad. And like he said, we appreciate everyone's time today joining us. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. So Gregory, early in preparations for this webinar, you mentioned the focus on creating unique experiences for recruits and fans, with an emphasis on a digital experience incorporating visual, sound, and people. Can you elaborate on those and the trends you're seeing in the industry and in athletic facilities on Auburn University's campus?
Absolutely, Caitlin. One of the biggest trends we're seeing is the concept of activating interior and outdoor spaces using dynamic media. What we're not seeing as much is the use of interactive type media. And I think one of the reasons for that is everyone is very comfortable with their phones and even the apps on their phones that they're used to using on a daily basis. So to introduce an interactive component, we're really seeing less of that because of the time it takes for them to familiarize themselves with that interactive app. But back to the dynamic media that we do see a lot of is really in the areas of AVL, audio, video, and lighting. And in our facilities, recently we have added very, very nice, very high-end audio systems in both our football stadium and in our arena. And the reason what we really try and focus on is being able to obviously produce enough volume, enough bass, enough low-end frequency, but really to make it intelligible. We want to make sure that the messages that we are sending out can be understood by as many fans and prospects as possible. Another major component is the video, and that's where we use digital displays. And we do that, and we've done that recently in 3 main areas, and that's in our stadium. Our south end zone video board is actually the largest high definition video board in college football. And that is just a huge opportunity for fans to be on the video board, for obviously us to have replays of the game, for advertising, and it's very large, it's very active, and it just activates the stadium from flashing of lights to just the content that we want to portray. Also in the arena, we recently have done a digital display in there with our center hung, a brand new center hung. But really one of the unique places we've done it is our recruiting center at the stadium, where it's inside the lobby of the building, but it's got large glass windows that look out onto kind of the street that passes by the recruiting center. And so as you're driving by, especially at night, you see that flash of light, you see the video, not to distract drivers, but it's something that when students that are walking by, they can see it, and we can promote different sporting events, we can promote highlights from the last football game, all of those things. So even though you're not in the building, it's something that you can see outside the building by intentionally placing the digital display there, where we can really show anything we want and change it all the time. And then last is lighting as part of AVL, and that is something where we have recently replaced the lighting at our football stadium and in our basketball arena with LED lights. And what that does is gives us the opportunity to do several things. One, we have RGBW, so we have colored lights that we can have different colors depending on the months of the year or the holiday, or maybe something that happens in a game, some pre-game event. And so that's really exciting for the fans. to be able to experience that both for basketball and for football. And the other major advantage to LED lighting is that you can turn it on and off and you don't have to restrike it and take 20 minutes for it to come back on. So those are some strategies of ways that we have activated our spaces in order to appeal to our prospects, to our fans, and even to kind of get our players hyped before the game.
Thanks, Gregory. Andre, how about University of Cincinnati? Being an urban campus with your facilities having an open concept, allowing visitors to come and go, have you all focused trends not only around fans and recruits, but the public using your facilities as well?
Yeah, Caitlin. So in my 8 years here at University of Cincinnati, we've undergone 2 major capital projects. So we've torn down a football press box and built a new one, and then we've done an arena full gut redo. So both of those projects were really pressed for time as our teams were playing off-site during the downtime and construction phase. So we really wanted to get started immediately right after the previous season. I mean, I can remember taking TVs down from the old football press box and really getting everything out of that press box that we didn't want demolished the next day after our last game. It was a pretty quick turnaround. But part of both of those projects was certainly the digital elements. And that was a lot of conversation with our teams, our marketing department, that brought their ideas to the table. Football, we were able to add ribbon boards along the press box. The basketball, volleyball arena, we were able to do a full, all new digital world in there with the center hung scoreboard, an outdoor screen, concession TVs, and then so that, and you'll see some pictures of that coming up later. But and a sidebar story is we did add a football scoreboard a couple years down the road, a new video board in the football venue, with the help of, we had a major tenant, and this is a pretty unique story where we had a MLS soccer team playing in our football venue. So we were able to partner with them and cost share on a new video screen for the stadium. They've since built their own stadium and moved on. And we're left with the scoreboard. So that was a unique, I know not everyone has that opportunity, but we sure took advantage of that. So while we use the digital elements in both of those projects, similar to what Gregory was talking about for in-game promos and in-game aspects, University of Cincinnati has a real open campus. Our football venue in particular is open. The concourses are open during the day. Students and public can transverse through the stadium to get from building to building, class to class. So we captured that and took advantage of that, the foot traffic and car traffic around the stadium, where the video screen is very visible. So we took advantage of that, and we use it for several things, including ticket sale advertisements, letting people know when especially students, when student tickets are going on sale or available. We congratulate teams if they win a championship on our end. We welcome new coaches to the athletic department. It's just a nice visual as they come to campus for the first time and see their face and a welcome sign up there. Just a nice first impression on our end. Going back to our soccer tenant, we would paint the turf back and forth between football and soccer. So we use the video screen and ribbon boards as a warning to students to stay off the turf and the wet paint. So that helped us out convey that messaging. And recently we partnered with our police department, and we're looking at using the boards for emergency announcements if there was an emergency on campus or even impending severe weather. So we're really using it to its full potential and really pushing out whatever messages that we need to push out for the day.
Right. Thanks, Andre. Brad, Christopher, LBYD has completed several projects to enhance the digital experience, including non-static media elements. Can you talk about what some of those projects entailed?
Sure, Caitlin. Gregory and Andre both mentioned video boards, and I guess if you can get a Major League Soccer tenant, then you can get them to help pay for your board. That's pretty cool at Cincinnati, but certainly a great way to advertise and to show dynamic images, not the old video boards where it's just a big frame around the outside and you just had a small high definition screen in the middle. You could also do some stuff on the backside of your video board. Andre mentioned ribbon boards. We see a lot of that. We do a lot of feasibility studies and documents for professional sports organizations that not only are looking at upgrading their video boards, but adding ribbon boards. It's you're not really adding much structure. You're attaching to something that you've already got. We've done some feasibility studies for boards for the Miami Heat, for Toronto Blue Jays and Las Vegas Raiders. Some of them were looking at just some freestanding video displays just outside their stadium, but did a pretty cool project for the Philadelphia Union, which is a Major League Soccer team, and they had a 110-foot wide scoreboard, but only a third of it was just high definition LED screen, and they wanted to make it a little bit bigger, but just really wanted to take advantage of that 110 feet wide. So we replaced that screen, the full 110 foot wide, and then we added a little bit on top for some speakers. And so didn't spend very much money on structure, was able to use the base and the foundations that they already had, but just take advantage of the width to provide high definition all the way across. Indoor football practice factor, but those are good, obviously, to provide a digital experience. Many of you on this call have indoor practice facilities. They're pretty economical structures to begin with. They're pre-engineered metal buildings, usually about a 200-foot clear span. Have some bright colors, but again, a lot of room for lights and audio and digital. And then finally, we finished up a major renovation project last year at the University of Alabama at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and they and concessions, they added ADA seating, they did a lot of neat stuff in the stadium. But a couple things they did to make sure they were improving the digital experience was they swapped out their 4 corner boards, video boards, and just made all those a little bit bigger. And then where the players finish up walking into the stadium, what they call the Walk of Champions, instead of finishing up just coming up some steps and going into a building at the end, we ended up designing a tunnel, obviously, that goes underground. It goes into their locker room, put a concrete cap and some pavers on it, but provided a lot of walls, continuous LED.
Thanks, Brad. So switching subjects from capital projects, let's now focus on adaptive reuse of facilities to fit university needs. This places an emphasis on activating old spaces and creating for the end user. Trends include the focus on large open areas, environmental graphics, and reducing capacity within stadiums and arenas to increase the fan experience. Andre, University of Cincinnati recently underwent a major renovation of the existing arena. Can you discuss the decision to completely gut and renovate versus just building a new facility?
Yep. So we looked at the possibility of tearing down the current venue in its current spot. We came to the conclusion that we could not build on the same spot new. It was just too tight, too landlocked. So we took a look at building new on other areas of campus, other areas off of campus. None of that really came to fruition. So we decided to do a total gut redo. The bones of our current structure were still good. We felt that the structural framing, the walls, the foundation could be reused in parts. So we took advantage of that. Obviously, the benefits of that are a shorter timeline, decreased cost, less waste, and it would be, when we reopened, it would be in the same spot. So it had a historical element to it, to staying in the same spot. We did lose some seats. We lost about 1,000 seats, but we felt that the added premium spaces were well worth it. And to get to the root of the question, campus, the adaptive reuse, that UC, University of Cincinnati, had a dire need for classroom space. So we partnered with campus a little bit on that, and we are using one of our club spaces. We call it the Arena Club. we double that as classrooms. So it's tricked out with all the classroom AV screens and projectors and audio that's needed for a classroom. It has a wall that divides a big room into two smaller rooms. And then we use it for basketball games as a lounge, a premium space for some ticket holders. So we open up the wall, rearrange the furniture. It's definitely a multi-use space. And then we reuse the AV portions as we need. So we're showing game highlights on the video screens and the projectors. We're using the sound to play music so that our folks can be in there pregame and at halftime to enjoy the concessions in the bar area. So it's a pretty unique situation where students are coming into the arena for class. They seem to enjoy it. Our challenge there is keeping them out of areas that we don't want them to go to, but I think we're in a good spot after a year of trial and error. So it gives the students a sense of a little they're a piece of the puzzle in our arena. So how many students can say they go to class in one of their basketball arenas? So we enjoy it.
That's neat. Gregory, what about on Auburn University's campus? Can you talk about some facilities you've adapted?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was little technical difficulties with the muting. Yeah, so quickly, one of the areas that we looked at was we needed some more premium space in our stadium, and what we went through the whole stadium and really evaluated it from a real estate perspective. And one of the things we noticed was the west side along the sidelines was an area that was underserved from a premium standpoint. And so what we did when we did our recruiting project is we moved the press box to the corner of our stadium on top of our recruiting center, and then developed a high-end premium space where the press box used to be. There's some adjustments we had to make from an ADA standpoint, but we have now outdoor seating and indoor space for a real nice club situation. Something else we do at the stadium, which is really fun, is with the large video board in the south end zone, we have movie nights for the students. So we partner with Student Affairs and we open the stadium up, and students can bring their blankets as long as they don't mess up the grass. And we show recent movies. We got the great sound system, and it's just a unique experience for the students here at Auburn University. And then lastly, right now we're actually in the middle of studying an adaptive reuse situation where our football program will be vacating our existing indoor practice facility and part of our athletic complex and moving to their own. So that has freed up an indoor practice facility. It has also freed up a lot of square footage in a building that's really strategically located. So what we're doing is we're kind of looking through is what is our department's philosophy on nutrition? What is our philosophy on coaches being in one building or in separate buildings, and really strengthening, using this as an opportunity to strengthen our Olympic village that we already have at some level, but this will really solidify what we're trying to do here at Auburn University from an Olympic sports standpoint.
Great. Brad Harrison, from a design perspective, what are you focused on when determining feasibility of an adaptive reuse project?
Sure, Caitlin. Probably the most important thing for me when I'm getting involved is just understanding what information is going to be available to me. Whereas, for structural guys, whereas most of the other disciplines are probably looking at a gut and redo, kind of like Andre said earlier, for holistic programmatic changes, often the desire is to make as few modifications to the existing structure as possible. So I have to have information to try to mitigate that risk associated with existing structures. It really boils down to, does the owner have as-built drawings of the facilities that are going to be modified? And so a sidebar to this discussion is that the owners really need to have a good document management practice for new and existing facilities. And we know that, 80, 90-year-old stadiums probably don't have very good documents, but we can do better moving forward. It's not a good excuse in 10 to 15 years from now when you have an adaptive reuse project that you're entertaining on a relatively new facility and you don't have good as-built to make that process easier. Not having those documents really cost the owners money and time. There's major cost and schedule implications of not having information, extensive field work associated with getting out and determining, hey, what are the as-built conditions? Can we even determine what we've got without tearing into things? And if some of that information can't be determined, it could potentially kill a project, because the risk associated with starting a construction project on an existing facility and having this major unknown associated with the structure, there's just too much risk associated with that. So it can kill a project. Facility condition reports are a good thing that owners can do, user groups can do to kind of mitigate some of the risk associated with those unknowns. LBYD does a lot of condition assessment reports. They're cheap insurance to ensure facilities are performing as expected, and it really helps mitigate those unknowns when adaptive reuse projects come up in the future. Another thing is trying to get in, the sub-consultants under the architect, and we know that the architect is typically the one who's got the vision, who's selling the project. They're the ones that are in front of the owners and user groups, and so we fully understand that they're driving the train. But it's important for us to get involved early, just so that we can help address some of the potential low-hanging fruit opportunities for space modifications and programmatic changes. May not be optimal, but at least I can put that on the table if there's an area in existing structure that is much more conducive for a new space use, at least like the architect and owner to know that early. The other thing is that there can be architectural ramifications of major changes to the structure that aren't fully understood at the, kind of those pre-design levels. For instance, if we're having to remove columns to improve sight lines in an existing arena, well, we may have to hang some of that load from the roof above or create some existing structure above that space. And so we may have structural elements that now are into spaces that you had not planned on it earlier, or they may be visible. And some of that needs to be shown in in the renderings that the architect's doing. It may not be a deal breaker, but at least we'd like for that information to be shown as early as possible in the process.
Thanks, Brad. Adaptive reuse of existing facilities has become a necessity not only with universities across the country, but adapting spaces to fit the current health crisis. Andre, Cincinnati has adapted their facilities during COVID for uses outside of sports. Can you talk about what some of those were?
Sure. So, like many of you on this webinar, we use our facilities generally historically for some outside rentals when available as a source of revenue. But again, like all of you on this call, we're reusing our facilities in a different way over the last year plus. Specifically, we've partnered with our local health department, our university sports medicine department, and our university health department, just to use our facilities for things like COVID testing and COVID vaccine distribution. So, specifically on our end, we've used our arena concourse. We took advantage of the concourse flow, where you're able to bring in people for a vaccine through one set of doors, transverse through the concourse, get your vaccine, sit in the stands for your 15-minute observation period, and then exit a different set of doors. So you're not backtracking and going against the grain with others that are coming in. So that is one example of what we've done. And then to piggyback off that a little bit, like everyone again is, and I won't get into it too much, just changing their facilities when they're having guests come to sporting events, and all the things that we had to do this past year as far as blocking off seats and having hand sanitizer and extra cleaning, et cetera. I mean, that's all ways that we've adjusted our day-to-day event to event procedures within our athletic department. And I'm sure many of you have as well.
Thanks, Andre. We've discussed new and adaptive reuse of facilities, but now I'd like to shift our focus on the maintenance of those facilities. The cost of deferring maintenance is not an exciting topic, but it's necessary to the life of facilities. Brad Harrison, having experience from both the design perspective and working in facilities, what are some best practices that you've seen?
Sure. Like Brad Christopher stated earlier, obviously deferred maintenance is not something that gets paraded in front of your big donors, or is it anything that's, you know, it's not extremely exciting to talk about in your groups, but it's critical, of a critical importance. And so I think the biggest thing is to have the conversation, know that deferred maintenance is something that has to stay at the forefront of everybody's, you know, scheduling and budgetary needs. So some of the big bullet points is to have a plan, even if you know the plan is going to change, and we know that, especially within athletics, you know, your number one priority today most likely won't be your number one priority a week from now. Things changed and they're ever evolving, and we know that. But not having a plan is not a good response. The other, I guess, another bullet is to understand that managing you know, a deferred maintenance program, especially across multiple facilities, is an absolute bear to try to manage. So you need to make sure you have the right number of resources and personnel to stay on top of that for your facilities. A dedicated person just to manage the plan and interact with campus facilities and your maintenance organization may be a good thing. You may need something like that. Have discussions with your facilities management design leaders concerning material choices for your facilities. Some materials perform better in certain environments. Concrete as a whole in an exposed structure has a little bit less deferred maintenance issues associated with it. Steel has to be recoated fairly frequently, and if you miss it or there's an area that you can't access in the right environmental conditions, it can erode very quickly. The other thing is, I talked briefly about doing some condition assessment reports, and it's a cheap insurance policy, spending $5,000 to $10,000 every 3 to 5 years on a facility, just so that you know what is the time frame associated with making certain repairs on your facilities is easy and cheap information. Be as proactive as you can afford to be, and know that for every square foot of new space you bring online, you're going to have some plan for how that's going to impact your deferred maintenance budget in the next 5 to 20 years.
Thanks, Brad. Gregory and Andre, you both have programs that develop schedules for maintenance and cost. Gregory, can you talk about the importance of those assessments to extend the life of facilities?
Absolutely. They're critical and really important, because what it does, no one likes surprise spending. Planned spending is so much better than surprise spending. And so what these plans do, it allows us to look at a 3 to 5 to 7 year plan, both for maintenance and for deferred maintenance and operations. But then that also helps us even on the capital project side. So when you have this handled over here from a plan perspective, then it also helps when you want to do newer projects. And what we have found, and everyone on this call is involved with athletics, is you got to have a good team, you got to have the right team members, and you want the best team members you can get. So what we intentionally do is get consultants that understand us, understand our facilities. So from a structural and civil standpoint, we use LBYD. We use other consultants for mechanical, plumbing, and electrical to give us annual evaluations of our facilities, so that way we can develop and really modify those 3 to 5 and 7 year plans. And what that does is that makes our spending planned instead of surprised, and really gives us the opportunities to do some of the newer projects that we want to do, which is good for our fans, it's good for our prospects, it's good for our coaches, and all of our constituents.
And now we've got a quick PowerPoint we're going to show with some project photos of ones that we talked throughout the discussion.
Yeah, Hannah, you can go ahead and roll that. I think the first couple are some indoor football practice facilities. We'll run through these pretty quickly, I think the first one is the University of Florida. And again, these already have a big wow factor, but they certainly provide a lot of area that you can provide digital experience. You can provide static, non-static. Again, very economical structures. This is a turf field. There's no slab on grade underneath that. The next one is Clemson University. Clemson did put a little video board at one end, but again, just you have a tremendous amount of opportunity in there, not just for the players that are getting out of the rain and practicing, but certainly for fans and recruits. The next one is a photo of the tunnel I was talking about at University of Alabama. Again, they did major renovations to their stadium, but just pretty cool how they added a tunnel into their locker room and provided a lot of opportunity for continuous LED and strip lighting. And again, pretty cool on game day for the players, but certainly would take recruits in there as well. The next one is a plan view of a new football stadium down in Mobile. This is University of South Alabama. This opened up last year. South Alabama was playing off campus. They did not have an on-campus stadium, so pretty cool to put this on campus. And obviously they got the video board on the left. They've got a smaller board on top of the operations building on the right. A little hard to see, but they've got some ribbon board really between the 30s on each side of the stadium. But really on this project, the architect did a good job of just trying to create just freedom of movement and connectivity and providing a digital environment. Like Gregory said, everybody's got an iPhone, everybody knows how to use apps. And so they want to be able to move around and congregate, but still be connected to the game. I think the days of folks sitting on 18 inches of aluminum for 3 to 4 hours at a time, may be over. People still want to go to the games, but they like that tailgating experience of socializing, still watching the game, but they like to be able to do that at the game. Also, a little bit hard to see, but on the one of the end zones, the left side end zone in front of the video board, they've got a terrace area where they've got just stand-up tables. Again, just standing around, congregating, move around the stadium. A lot of TVs around the stadium. Andre mentioned that. A lot of stadiums do that. But still being able to follow the game on your phone or your tablet or a TV and just be able to move around and still be connected. The next one is a shot of the Philadelphia Union scoreboard. I mentioned that earlier. That one is for the Major League Soccer team. Again, didn't do anything to the width. We did increase the height to make the board a little taller, add some speakers, but pretty much just use the existing structure like it was, but provide high definition for the entire width. And then the next one, the video board at Auburn University we worked on, that was in 2015. And that's a freestanding structure, does not connect to the stadium at all. And we've talked about, all the opportunities for digital on that, but just from a construction schedule standpoint, I'll try not to get too far in the weeds on the structural engineering, but all of you on this call that do construction projects at your campuses, you have an end of a season and a beginning of a next season, and you'd love to squeeze in the construction there. Andre talked about, I think they had to miss one football season, and sometimes that's what you have to do. For this video board, it was constructed in about 6 months. It was designed in less than 2 months. So start the clock at 8 months, and then it was finished from there. From a structural engineer standpoint, we obviously can design the beams, columns, and foundations. We also do the steel connections. We have a construction engineering division. Typically, a fabricator will hire that out. We were able to do that. And on this project, we didn't issue structural drawings. We issued fabrication drawings. We issued the steel detailed model to the fabricator, and as soon as it was bid, they could start fabricating. We did not sacrifice any quality. We just shrunk a little bit of the design time because we could do that all in-house, but really a cool project. Gregory, I think you'll talk next on a couple of the things at the Auburn Stadium.
Correct. The next slide shows our press box relocation. You can see in the distance here, the grayer area in the corner is where we relocated the press. And then in the front of this photo, you see the new Broadway Club. Actually, this is during construction where we haven't put the seats in yet. And what looks simple actually was a very interesting project, especially from a structural standpoint. LBOID was the structural engineer on it. We actually got old plans from the late 1970s to show a column situation where we needed to shave down a column in order to get ADA compliance for this project. And luckily, we had the documentation to show what the rebar was and everything else. We also did some X-ray imaging on that column just to confirm where the rebar was. But this was a project that really, from an adaptive research, reuse, but also the importance of documentation, where really it could have killed the project if we did not have that information. And then we also came up with some temporary, which turned into permanent measures in order to support the system underneath where you see the seating in order to make this happen. So there was some creative design associated with this. There was the institutional knowledge that was used in this case. And I also like to touch on that. You have folks, a lot of folks have people that have worked in the department for years and years and years that have a lot of institutional knowledge. That's really good to have, but to have something or a group like LBYD or other consultants that can document that and do annual inspections really helps out. And in this case, this is an area where that really helped us. The next slide is with University of Cincinnati.
Yep, so here you can see the before and after pictures of our basketball, volleyball gut redo of our venue. So on the left, you see the center hung video screen. You see the fixed digit scoreboard off in the distance, and that's really it for AV digital elements in the old venue. And then fast forward to the right, and you see, you know, the significant upgrade in the center hung board with the ribbon board underneath, four-sided screens. We have the pie wedges in between the four sides. Those are digital as well, LEDs. Four-sided ribbon boards all the way around the venue. No more fixed digit anything. Everything is LED. And then off in the far corner, you can see the curved video screen that's there. So we take advantage of that. There's 4 of those, 1 in each corner. And it's just a real unique look that we presented, and we use it for stats and additional messaging, advertisements. So it's just more inventory for our folks to use, and just a real unique way of presenting it. And then I think we got one more slide. And this is our before and after of our football press box project. On the left, you see the little press box. It's about a 200-person club area, some old rooms for network TV and radio and press. So we tore that down, we hazed it, and built new, a 5-story tower, 1,100 seat press box, or 1,100 seat club room, 22 suites with an inside and an outside seating area. And then the glassed in area on the top left is our operational booth, our command center, print media, coaches boxes, visiting athletic director, and then certainly network TV and radio. So a significant upgrade on our end. You know, hosting events in there in the club room became a possibility, and then obviously just a selling point for the venue as a whole. To recruits and to general student body. So at this point, I think I'll kick it back to Caitlin, and I think we're up to Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Andre. And thanks everyone for sending in your questions, and please feel free to continue sending those in and we'll get to them. So first question we've got, regarding an existing video board, please elaborate on the process of determining options and cost of making the board larger.
Hey, Caitlin, I'll jump in on that and touched on it a little bit with the Philadelphia Union scoreboard example, but a really common request we get, because a lot of you wonder, what if we could do this? And then the next question is, how much does it cost? Certainly look at 3 options on those. Look at, you know, can we just use the existing structure you have and go full high definition on that? As Brad Harrison mentioned earlier, and I think Gregory too, having as-built drawings is a huge help. I mean, we can field measure what we can see. Foundations are a little tougher. Not having drawings on those could be a challenge, but try to use what you've got. The second option would be, you know, can we reinforce or stiffen with plates, angles, that type thing, channels, and just make it bigger. Again, making sure the foundations and the base of the structure can handle that wind load. As you can guess, the critical load case is it's just surface area and wind load on that. And then third is just taking the structure completely down. Maybe you're using existing foundations, maybe not, and putting all new structure. But we can run through a feasibility study pretty quickly and give you these options, give you a range of construction budgets for those and what kind of design and construction timeline. A lot of these types of projects we'll work with a company called Anthony James Partners. Many of you are familiar with them, AV consultant, and also serves as an owner's rep. But sort of they can help on some of this budgeting and laying out these feasibility studies as well.
Thanks, Brad. Next question. Can someone speak to issues with unforeseen or unintended consequences of new AV or adaptive reuse projects?
Yeah, I could see vibration certainly being an issue there. Maybe Brad Harrison, if you want to jump on that from an engineering standpoint, we'll let Gregory or Andre chime in as well if they'd like.
Sure. So when I think of unforeseen conditions, it kind of goes back to, what information is not available to me during the design that I have to mitigate via, some design effort or some bid effort to kind of cover those things that I didn't know. The unintended consequences, like Brad said, there are things as the engineer of record that we have to account for in our design, high-powered, low-frequency vibrations in the structure, something that we're obviously going to take a look at. But that doesn't necessarily capture all of the issues associated with, high-powered LEDs or, high-powered, low-frequency as it relates to neighbors. There may be impacted individuals that you haven't really considered in the design process that may be impacted. I can foresee that it wouldn't be uncommon, to have this new high-powered sound system that impacts certain user groups on campus that you had not planned for. And so communication is really critical amongst the user groups, but also, with the academics on the campus as well. And I'm sure Gregory and Andre have probably come across some similar instances on their projects.
Yeah, I mean, we experience exactly this. Our College of Music is right next to our football stadium. So you can imagine the conversations we get in with the folks over in the College of Music. And we've gotten to a good point where, obviously they can get our football schedule and our game schedule as we play some other sports in there too. But the current trend these days is for teams to play music while they're practicing. So we ran into that one pretty quickly with the College of Music reaching out to us, wondering what the music was coming from the football stadium during a practice time. And so we've gotten into a habit of communicating with them, giving them practice times, at least coming to an agreeable sound level, for the football team playing music. And I think we're in a good spot now moving forward with that. But that was certainly something we didn't think about or anticipate when we did that. But communication is key as it always is on items like that.
Yeah, I agree, Andre. I have found that because our stadium is literally in the middle of campus, really communication, but doing it early on. Like even in the design process if you need to, but as early as possible, just to let people know so they can plan, because typically neighbors and folks on campus can plan around those type things if you give them enough notice. Most people don't like surprises when it comes to loud music or things like that. And we actually reached out to the mayor and we were testing our sound system and our video board, making sure the neighbors knew that nothing too crazy was happening on campus.
Thanks, guys. And it looks like this question is for Andre and Gregory. Have you thought about integrating outside offerings in conjunction with your existing facilities to provide unique experiences for potential recruits? An example would be the University of Florida turning its football stadium into a Topgolf fairway.
I'll answer for us. I mean, yes, we're at University of Cincinnati. We're open to anything as far as if it makes sense, isn't going to hurt the field, uses our video screens. We've had movie nights like Gregory mentioned. We've had outside events. You know, we're in graduation season right now. But recruit specifically, yeah, our football program uses the digital elements in the football venue for when they have recruit days, and you know, there's rules of what they can and can't do using those things. So they're certainly checking with compliance office and doing that. But we did see that Topgolf one. That looks awesome.
Yes, I mean, we're obviously in a very, very competitive situation from a facility standpoint, and then obviously on the field. And so we're always looking for ways to enhance the game day experience and to provide fans and prospects the best experience they can have. So we are absolutely open to those things, whether they're in our facilities or just adjacent to our facilities on game day. Those are all things that we are always very open to.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And it looks like we may have time for one more question. So in regards to restoration and maintenance, how often do you suggest having exposed structures inspected?
Yeah, good question. I guess, you know, I think Gregory mentioned annual inspections. We certainly do that with a lot of Auburn facilities and other university facilities. You know, it kind of depends on the facility. Once you get a history and some background, maybe you don't have to do it as often. But Brad, I'll let you touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, it really depends on, you know, how much the can is getting kicked. You know, if we find issues that we're reporting need to be addressed, you know, immediately or in 3 to 5 years, and some of those they just can't be done, then we want to look at those on a more regular occurrence. Like Brad said, after we've developed kind of a historical log of the restoration and maintenance, and we've kind of gotten into a rhythm of knowing what we're going to tackle each and every year, those surprises, they don't pop up anymore. And so what we may have been doing annually, we may do biannually. You know, we may come every other year. We may do it every 5 years, depending on kind of the wear and tear that we're seeing in the facility. So it varies.
Greg or Andre, y'all want to add on to that?
I mean, really from a structural standpoint, I like to see things done specifically when you have large assembly spaces done annually. So I also look at it from an assembly standpoint, like how many people are going to be there, how big of a deal. I mean, roping off a portion of our stadium in a non-COVID situation because of structural issues that we've neglected is really not viable at all. So, but there's other things like mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. We may do those every 3 to 5 years, those evaluations. So really, we just assess the risk and look at the assembly space to see really how many folks are using it.
Andre, you good? You have anything to add on that?
I guess the only thing I'll add is, you know, specific to those of you out there that have turf fields, is to not forget about including your turf in your you know, inspection annually. And I'm sure if there's a turf issue out there, your teams let you know about it. But the revolving you know, turf installs and pre-planning for those for years down the road is certainly to be included with the preventative maintenance side.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, just as we've talked about, just getting started with inspection, just so you can have some history and put together, you know, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 7 year plan. And then when you do the deck coating or the painting and major undertaking because you've budgeted for it, you've planned for it, but certainly you've got to have some maintenance each year. You don't, I don't like the word deferred maintenance. That just means you are kicking it down the road, and it's going to be more expensive, and you're going to have some surprises, which you don't want. So, well, I think we're getting near the top of the hour. I think there's a few more questions in there, but I'm sorry we won't be able to get to those. But I'll try to wrap us up again. We want to be respectful of you guys' time. I know everybody on here is extremely busy, but thank you again for taking the time and your attention today on this webinar. I hope you have learned something about the latest trends. Again, everybody knows about video boards and ribbon boards. They are great opportunities. Again, indoor practice facilities. Like I talked about at South Alabama, just having the freedom to move around and be connected. Like Gregory said, just everybody's on their phone. You might as well use that, but people don't want to just sit still. I think for 3 or 4 hours, they want to have a little more of an experience, and having some dynamic digital images certainly contribute to that. Adaptive reuse, hopefully you've heard some ideas from Andre and Gregory on some different things they can use their facilities. The question on the Top Golf Live, I have heard about that. That there's several universities across the country doing that. I would love to attend that, see what that's like. And then in the restoration and maintenance, which we just touched on, again, it's a necessary evil, but you got to pay attention to it. You got to have a plan. You want to be proactive. You absolutely do not want to just be reactive. And like Gregory said, be shutting down a section of your stadium during an event. Hiring design professionals to assist with any of these items is certainly prudent. As we mentioned at LBYD, we have a lot of experience in these arenas. We can certainly help you with the planning and the feasibility studies, just give you an idea of what that scope of work is, how much is it going to cost, and a timeline. We'll be responsive. We'll pay attention to budget accuracy. We'll be predictable, and we'll just simply do what we say we're going to do. And finally, Hannah and Tom McMillan, just a huge thanks to you all for organizing this, giving us this opportunity. I want to thank our panel as well. And as Hannah touched on earlier, a recording of this webinar will be circulated within 24 hours. So I think that wraps us up. I do appreciate all your time and hope you have a great rest of the week. Thank you.